So, in working with clients that come in after a trauma that has kind of flooded and overwhelmed them, this can be very, very challenging for the clinician, especially if the client's orientation is one where they are more checked out and numb. You may have clients that are very agitated. Honestly, that in many ways, and I'm speaking through my own experience, is a lot easier to kind of track and work with and regulate. But for the client that comes very, very disconnected, disembodied, it's really hard. Again, it's like truly going into this kind of cloud with the client. And it's very difficult, and it's honestly in some ways can be very punishing to the clinician because you're just not sure where to be. And so I think it's important to discuss various strategies of how do you as a clinician resource yourself with a client that's numb, because they're not going to give you a lot of feedback. When you're asking them kind of what's happening, or I don't really know, right? I don't know what I'm feeling. And there's a flatness to it. And so what I have found to be very important as a clinician is to have my own grounding techniques, to be able to stay present, to notice when in tracking in my own behavior, when I'm starting to get really lightheaded and kind of turning into the observer. And what I found to be really helpful is honestly I have like a little pillow in my chair that I kind of press against my chest sometimes, and just kind of ground myself, ground down into the floor. And I often lean a little bit more in with my client. So in general, when I work with clients that are more numb and disconnected, I tend to kind of close a little bit of the proximity to the client. So I actually sit a little bit closer. There's a little bit of leaning in. Now we negotiate this at the beginning of our work together. But I often find that my checked out clients are less checked out when I am in, closer physical proximity to them than when I'm farther away. The farther away I get, the more that kind of disconnection kicks in. The reverse is for a client that is more agitated and hyperaroused. I give them more space, which allows them to come down. But a hypoaroused client, I lean in, and we talk about that ahead of time, which helps them ground as well. So it's kind of modeled grounding, modeled presence that starts to work with that challenge. So I think it's important to think about what are the interventions with someone who has in many ways embodied that hypoaroused response, and that their whole body is collapsed, it's drawn in, it's disconnected. So right away, I start working with clients deeply in movement. I want them moving, even just extending their joints and really sensing that, right? Like as I'm just kind of looking at this extension and feeling that in the body. I spend a lot of time with a hypoaroused client or a numb client, just experiencing sensation. Right. I literally, with one client who was completely disconnected, I went to I have a little break room, and I boiled some water and put it in a coffee mug and had her hold in one hand that coffee mug to sense heat. And then I had some popsicles. This is always a great reward for people with sensation exercises because they could have the popsicle at the end. But placing the popsicle in the other hand and sensing how cold and heat and feeling the dissipation of heat and that sensation, right? Really helping them learn about how their body responds, so that even to be curious about what numb is like what numb truly feels like in the body, right? Versus kind of the cognitive numb. And so like holding something really cold for a long time, that's what numb is, because something that's initially starts as numb starts to get painful in some ways, right? And then trying to pair an emotion with the sensation. So we do a lot of embodied movement exercises for people who are hypoaroused, and to start dropping the narrative, because it's the narrative that keeps that survival defense activated, and we bring more environmental and body stimulation into the healing space.